Welcome to the Host with Confidence podcast. I'm Becky Guzak, here to empower the hesitant host to entertain with confidence and ease. I'll be sharing stories, strategies, and inspiration on how to take out the stress and boost up the joy of welcoming guests into your home. Okay, let's get started.
Welcome. Today's episode is a little different. It's a moment to pause and reflect. Over the past year, I've had conversations with chefs, writers, community builders, longtime hosts, and people who never thought of themselves as hosts. What stood out the most wasn't about perfect menus or flawless plans. It was about what actually helps people feel comfortable inviting others in. As I stepped back and listened across those episodes, a few clear lessons emerged. They all pointed to the same thing. Hosting is really about connection, not performance. So today, I'm sharing what 2025 taught us about gathering. 8 lessons drawn from a year of conversations about hosting, connection, and community. These aren't trends or rules. They're grounded reminders that take the pressure off hosting and bring the focus back to what matters most: comfort, inclusion, and showing up for one another. One of the biggest shifts this year is the idea that hosting doesn't need to feel like a performance. When we think we're supposed to impress, pressure creeps in. But when hosting is about comfort, emotional, physical, and social comfort, everything changes. As Sue Becky shared, people aren't coming over to be impressed. They're coming because they want to be with others. So that might look like choosing a relaxed menu you know well instead of trying something new for the first time, deciding ahead of time what good enough looks like, or sitting down with your guests instead of hovering in the kitchen. When the host feels comfortable, the gathering does too. So if there's one takeaway here, hosting is about comfort, not impressing. Another thing I heard this year is that many hesitant hosts don't actually dislike hosting, they just start too big. Big dinners, holidays, large groups, that's a lot. Confidence grows through repetition, not scale. In my conversation with Linda Schiller, what became clear was how important it is to start small. When hosting feels manageable, confidence has room to grow. So invite one neighbor or two over for coffee, a friend for takeout at the kitchen counter, or a walk with snacks. These gatherings count. Don't wait to feel confident. You build confidence by hosting. That's the heart of it. Confidence grows through small gatherings. Once you start hosting, even in small ways, you start to notice something else. People really appreciate clarity. Guests often want to help, but they don't want to guess. Uncertainty creates stress. Clarity creates ease. And that ease matters on both sides. It helps guests relax and takes the pressure off the host. In my conversation with Megan Wilson, what really stood out was how much calmer gatherings feel when expectations are clear. When people know what's happening and what's needed, everyone feels more at ease. So instead of saying, bring whatever you want, try, can you bring a green salad? Or would you mind opening the wine when you arrive? That kind of clarity helps guests feel useful and included, and it helps the host stop managing everything in their head. Clear direction turns guests into participants, and participation strengthens the gathering for everyone. Once expectations are clear, something else starts to matter more: planning ahead. The host who enjoys themselves the most aren't doing everything at the last minute. They've made a few simple decisions early, and they've shared the load. That might mean deciding the menu early, picking one dish you can make in advance, and setting the table and/or the gathering spaces ahead of time so it's already done. In my conversation with Charu Bogdan, she talked about how much more enjoyable hosting became once she stopped trying to do everything herself, and that shift took planning, deciding ahead of time what she would do and what she'd let go of. And that can look like batching the drinks ahead of time, asking someone else to grill, putting a stack of plates and napkins on the counter instead of plating everything yourself, or printing the recipe and letting a guest take the lead. Planning ahead creates space, because when the basics are handled, you can actually enjoy the people in the room. Doing everything yourself isn't a requirement of being a good host. Being present is. So the takeaway here, plan ahead, and share the load. Once the planning is handled, the food doesn't have to do all the work. What stood out to me this year is how often the most meaningful gatherings revolved around familiar food, not elaborate menus, not dishes meant to impress, just food people recognize and feel connected to. Like soup, sandwiches, a big salad, bread, and something to spread on it. In my conversation with Cynthia Nims, what really came through was how powerful familiar food can be. When food carries a story or sense of comfort, it invites conversation instead of attention. That might look like making a recipe you grew up with, sharing something you cook all the time, or serving food you know people will recognize and feel comfortable with. Simple food lowers the pressure on the host, and it gives people an easy, personal way to connect. The meal doesn't have to be the main event. It supports the gathering instead of competing with it. The takeaway here, simple food can help create deeper connections. Once the basics are covered, another layer starts to matter. Who feels included? This came up in many conversations this year, not as a checklist, but as an intention. In my conversation with Kirsten Vracko, she emphasized that inclusion isn't about offering more. It's about offering thoughtfully, making sure everyone feels considered. That can look like offering a non-alcoholic drink that feels just as special as everything else, pouring it into a pretty glass, garnishing it in a fun way, and placing it alongside other drinks, not off to the side. It can mean checking in about dietary needs ahead of time, or thinking about seating so no one feels left out of the conversation, or planning the timing so guests aren't rushed or overwhelmed. Inclusion doesn't require abundance. It doesn't require doing everything. It just requires attention. When people feel included, they relax, and relaxed people connect more easily. As the year went on, another pattern became clear. The gatherings that felt the most relaxed usually had one strong idea guiding them. Not 5 themes, not a long list of plans, just one clear focus. In my conversation with Carrie Jones and John McCarthy, what really stood out was how powerful it is to choose one thing and do it well, and let that be enough. When everything doesn't have to shine, something usually does. That might look like planning one great drink and keeping the rest simple, or choosing one main dish and letting everything else support it, or anchoring the gathering around a simple idea, soup night, a favorite things exchange, a potluck built around a theme. When there's one clear focus, decisions get easier. The host isn't juggling as much, and guests understand what the gathering is all about. Trying to do everything creates stress. Choosing one thing creates calm. And finally, one of the biggest lessons that came through this year is community isn't built in a single night. It's built over time, through repetition, through showing up again. In my conversation with Karen Guzak, what really stayed with me was the idea that gathering isn't about one perfect event. It's about creating a rhythm people can count on, something familiar, something welcoming. That might look like a monthly potluck, a standing walk and talk, a book club that meets even when attendance is small, or a favorite things party that becomes an annual tradition. Not every gathering will be memorable, not every one will feel effortless, but together they add up. Over time, people start to feel connected, not because of what you served or how you hosted, but because they know they belong. That's how community grows. So if there's one thing I hope you take from this year, it's great hosting isn't about doing more. It's about doing less with intention, creating comfort, making room for others, letting go of the idea that it has to be perfect. So many conversations this year pointed back to the same truth. When people feel welcome, included, and at ease, connection flows. Not because of what you served, not because everything went according to plan, but because you showed up and invited others in. Hosting with confidence isn't something you arrive at all at once. It's something you build, a gathering, one choice, and one invitation at a time. Thank you for listening and for being here. I look forward to bringing you more thoughtful, helpful conversations in the new year, ones that continue to support you as you gather, host, and build connection with confidence. As always, happy hosting.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Host with Confidence podcast. I hope you found inspiration and valuable insights to help you along your hosting journey. Please remember that the key to hosting with confidence is all about embracing your unique style, having a plan, and enjoying the process alongside your guests. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite platform. Your feedback and support are greatly appreciated and helps us build a stronger community.
Cheers.